Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some days you feel super focused and in control, while other days it is like your brain is just scattered all over the place? Well, a fascinating new study is giving us a peek into the science of what makes us tick, especially when it comes to our ability to stay on track. This paper dives deep into something called cognitive control. Think of it as your brain's inner executive, the part that helps you focus on your goals and ignore distractions. For years, scientists have tried to figure out how it works, often using brain teasers like the Stroop test, where you have to say the color of a word, not the word itself, which is much harder than it sounds. But recently, some big questions have popped up. Is cognitive control really just about stopping yourself from doing the wrong thing when there is a conflict? And how do we even measure it accurately? This research proposes a new way to look at it, using super cool computational models that help us understand how we make choices. So what is the big deal? Well, these researchers are saying that maybe we've been looking at cognitive control a little too narrowly. They found that instead of just focusing on situations where there is a clear conflict or a tricky problem, there is a more fundamental process at play that helps us just be good at gathering the right information to make a goal. Oriented decision, no matter what. Imagine you are trying to follow a recipe. Cognitive control is what helps you focus on the ingredients and steps. Even if your phone is buzzing or you are thinking about what to watch later, the traditional idea, often linked to the prefrontal cortex in your brain, is that your brain sends out special signals to boost the important stuff and quiet down the distractions. Think about the classic Stroop task again. The word red is written in blue ink. Your brain automatically wants to say red because it is a word, but your goal is to say the color of the ink, which is blue. Cognitive control is supposed to help you ignore the word red and focus on the color blue. This has been the main way we've studied cognitive control, by creating these conflicts and seeing how well people handle them. This approach has led to studies on things like the N-back task, where you have to remember what happened a few steps ago in a sequence of items. It can be tricky because familiar items might trick you into thinking they're the right answer when they're not. Researchers also look at task switching, where you have to switch from one rule to another. The common thread is this idea that cognitive control kicks in when things get tough, when there is conflicting information or a tough mental shift. But here is where things get interesting. The way scientists have measured cognitive control, often by comparing performance on hard, incongruent trials to easy congruent trials called subtraction methods, has started to show some cracks. The problem is these subtraction measures haven't been super reliable. If you give the same test to someone a few weeks apart, their score might change a lot. Also, tests that are supposed to measure the same thing, like different conflict tasks, don't always give similar results for the same person. And maybe most importantly, these measures often don't strongly connect to real-world things like reported self-control, or even things like ADHD, where we expect control to be impaired. Why is this happening? One idea is that maybe cognitive control isn't just one thing that gets turned on only when there is conflict. What if there are more general processes that are always helping us out, whether there is conflict or not? If that's the case, subtracting the easy condition from the hard, one might actually remove the very thing we're trying to measure. This is where the computer models come in. These aren't just programs. They're mathematical descriptions of how our brains make decisions, how we gather evidence, and then make a choice. They're called evidence accumulation models, or AIMs. Think of it like this. When you have to make a choice, your brain gathers little bits of evidence. For example, if you are deciding if a picture is a dog or a cat, you look for clues: furry, whiskers, tail shape. AIMs model how these bits of evidence are collected over time until there is enough to make a decision. They have different flavors, like the diffusion decision model, DDM, and racing accumulator models. The key idea is that there is a drift rate, which is basically how fast your brain is leaning towards one choice. There is also a threshold how much evidence you need before you commit. What's really cool is that these models can separate the quantity of evidence gathered from the quality of that evidence. Quantity is like how fast you are gathering any evidence. Good or bad, quality is about how well that evidence actually points towards the correct answer. The researchers here, and this is a big point, are focusing on what they call efficiency of evidence accumulation, or EEA. This represents the quality how good you are at gathering evidence that is actually relevant to your goal and ignoring the stuff that isn't. They've also developed conflict AIMs that try to explain those tricky conflict tasks. These models suggest that on hard trials, there might be an initial pull towards the wrong answer from automatic processes, but then controlled processes like our EEA kick in to correct it. So, they've identified two types of processes: conflict-specific ones that deal with the tricky bits when there is truly conflicting information, and task-general ones like EEA that are always working to help you gather relevant information. And here is the punchline. Their research suggests that the conflict-specific processes, the ones that deal directly with the hard parts, don't seem to be a stable general trait. They're different depending on the specific task. But that task general EEA we talked about, that's a different story. It seems to be a stable, reliable measure of how well you can gather goal-relevant information, and it does generalize across different tasks. This EEA is like a consistent engine powering your decision-making. It's not just about speed, it's about the quality of the information you're using. And it doesn't just work on those crazy conflict tasks. It is important for all sorts of tasks where you have to make a choice based on information. What is even more exciting is how this EEA connects to real life. Unlike those shaky subtraction measures, EEA shows strong links to things we care about. People who score higher on EEA tend to report having better self-control. And importantly, lower EEA is consistently found in conditions where control is thought to be impaired, like ADHD and substance use disorders. This is a big deal because it suggests EEA might be a fundamental factor underlying control, not just a side effect of dealing with conflict. Now, you might think EEA is just about how fast you think or processing speed. But the researchers argue against that. Speed is about how quickly you gather any information, while EEA is about how well you gather useful information for your goal. They've done studies that show EEA is more about the quality, the efficiency of focusing on what matters. So, if EEA isn't just speed, what is it? The researchers propose that it reflects the integrity of processes involved in goal-directed control. It's how well your brain can amplify the signals related to your current goals. Think back to that idea of top-down biasing signals from the prefrontal cortex. If these signals are working well, they should boost the relevant information, which is exactly what EEA measures. And interestingly, the brain networks associated with cognitive control, particularly in the frontoparietal network, also show strong links with EEA. This suggests that EEA might be a more fundamental aspect of goal-directed behavior, one that is active all the time, not just when things get tricky. It is about your brain's ability to prioritize what is important, regardless of whether there is a direct conflict. So, what is the mechanism behind EEA? The scientists suggest it is likely a set of processes that amplify goal-relevant information through top-down selection. This could involve focusing your attention, retrieving the right memories, or activating the correct task rules. They believe these mechanisms are domain general, meaning they help you pursue goals across many different situations. And because this ability to boost goal-relevant information is useful in almost any task, it explains why EEA is so ubiquitous. This new perspective urges us to rethink our focus on conflict. While conflict situations are important, the general ability to stay on track with your goals might be the more fundamental and stable trait. The authors propose that EEA acts as a fulcrum construct, a bridge connecting the microscopic workings of our brains, like neural networks, to the macroscopic outcomes in our lives, like self-control and dealing with mental health conditions. This is a powerful idea because it allows us to connect basic neuroscience research to real-world applications. So, what does this all mean? The main takeaway is that cognitive control might be better understood, not just as a fight against conflict, but as an ongoing ability to efficiently gather goal-relevant information. This EEA is a more reliable and meaningful measure of this ability than older methods. It hints that many problems we associate with poor control, like impulsivity or ADHD symptoms, might stem from a core difficulty in efficiently focusing on what matters rather than just an inability to suppress distractions. This could lead to new ways to understand and potentially treat these conditions. The researchers believe that future research should focus on disentangling these top-down selection mechanisms that contribute to EEA. They also suggest exploring how EEA relates to other complex traits like general intelligence, seeing it as a fundamental building block for many cognitive abilities. For me, this research is really exciting because it offers a more unified and mechanistic explanation for something as complex as our ability to control ourselves and pursue our goals. It takes us away from just looking at the problems, like conflict, and towards understanding the fundamental tools our brains use to stay on track. What I find particularly strong is the move away from subtraction methods, which we know have reliability issues, towards these computational models that offer a deeper dive into underlying processes. The idea of EEA being a general factor that underpins performance across so many tasks and connects to real-world outcomes like self-control and clinical conditions, is very compelling. A potential weakness, though, is that while they've identified EEA as important, the exact detailed mechanisms within the brain that create this efficiency are still being uncovered. This is a common challenge in neuroscience and psychology, but it is something to keep in mind. The real-world implications are huge. If we can develop better ways to measure and potentially even enhance EEA, it could have significant impacts on education, mental health interventions, and personal development. Imagine interventions tailored to improve this fundamental ability to gather relevant information. Future research will likely focus on pinpointing those underlying mechanisms, perhaps using brain imaging or even artificial intelligence models to simulate how this efficiency arises. They'll also continue to explore the links between EEA and various aspects of human behavior and well-being. Overall, this study offers a fresh and promising perspective on cognitive control, shifting our focus towards the fundamental efficiency with which we gather information to guide our actions. What do you think about these findings? Does this new way of thinking about cognitive control make sense to you? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.